NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte has managed to cool down a brewing clash between the alliance and Donald Trump over Greenland, but according to Politico, at a very high price. The article says Rutte chose a simple strategy: don't confront Trump in public, keep their relationship warm behind the scenes. That helped diffuse talk about annexing Greenland and avoided an open rift inside NATO. But in Europe, the approach is making many uneasy. Diplomats describe it as a band-aid, something that covers the problem without really fixing it. Some allies worry that too much goodwill only encourages Trump to push further next time. Politico points to a growing fault line inside the alliance. On one side is Rutte's belief that keeping the US fully on board matters more than anything else. On the other, European leaders who fear this strategy chips away at trust and shared rules. Rutte himself has been blunt. Europe cannot defend itself without the United States. He says that without Washington, European countries would have to massively boost defense spending, even consider their own nuclear deterrent, and pour billion and billion of euros into security. Politico's point is that NATO dodged the major crisis this time. But the bigger question remains: where is the line between smart diplomacy and concessions that could cost the alliance in the long run? Ukraine is expecting more Mirage fighter jets from France and new air defense missiles. Defense Minister Mikhailo Fedorov said that after talks with his French counterpart, Catherine Vautrin, Kyiv is counting on additional Mirage 205 aircraft. He called the move a major boost to Ukraine's air capabilities. Ukraine is also waiting for a new interceptor missiles for its air defense systems, as well as long-range weapons. France first delivered Mirage jets to Ukraine in February 2025 and has since promised more. In November, both countries signaled a deal that could lead to Ukraine purchasing up to 100 French-made Rafale fighters, along with the air defense systems and drones. Russia carried out a deliberate drone attack on a civilian passenger train in Ukraine's Kharkiv region, killing at least 5 people and leaving 4 others missing, Ukrainian authorities said. The train was carrying more than 200 passengers. One of the drones hit a single rail car where 18 people were inside at the time of the strike, according to President Zelensky. Prosecutors say 3 attack drones were used. Emergency crews continue searching for those still unaccounted for, while 2 people were confirmed injured. Identification of the victims will require DNA testing due to the condition of the bodies. Among the passengers was a Ukrainian soldier who helped others escape from the burning train, opening doors, lowering steps, and assisting a woman carrying an infant out of the damaged carriage. The train was traveling between western and eastern Ukraine when it was struck near a rural area in the Kharkiv region. This is not the first time Russia has targeted civilian trains in Ukraine. Previous attacks have hit rail lines and passenger routes used to connect peaceful cities, turning everyday travel into a frontline risk. While Russia continues to attack Ukraine every day, yet Donald Trump says he sees good things emerging between Kyiv and Moscow, as if a peace is already somewhere on the horizon.
We're looking at some very good things happening on Ukraine and Russia. Very good things. Very good things are happening on Ukraine and Russia.
President Trump made those comments after a phone call with the British Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, where they discussed the war in Ukraine and security in the Arctic. Both leaders said they agree on the need for a lasting ceasefire and continued support for Kyiv. Just to remind you, last week Ukraine, the United States and Russia held trilateral talks in Abu Dhabi. President Zelensky and the Ukrainian delegation called the meetings a step forward and generally constructive. But they also made it clear that the core disagreements are still there, especially over territory. In Kyiv, these contacts are seen as a way to keep the door open, to prepare for the next rounds of talks, and to push for real security guarantees. In Moscow, officials basically claimed everything was positive and constructive, but without breakthroughs. The reality is, their idea of a breakthrough would be Ukraine simply giving up its land. The Kremlin also hinted that solving the main issues will take more time. Western media described the talks as the first serious step in a three-way format, but without real results so far. Russia is still holding on its territorial demands, and the key questions remain wide open. More than 80% of Ukraine's strikes against Russian forces are now carried out by unmanned systems. Drones are now no longer support weapons. They are frontline. President Zelensky revealed the figure while honoring Ukraine's drone units, saying most of these systems are now built inside the country. Last year alone, Ukrainian forces hit nearly 820,000 targets using drones. Every strike is recorded on video to confirm the hit and to measure how each unit performs on the battlefield. Zelensky says infantry and artillery still matter, but the real advantage now comes from the speed. How fast can we design, build and deploy new technology? The commander of Ukraine's unmanned systems forces, Robert Brovdi, says his units were responsible for about a third of all drone strikes in December, inflicting hundreds of Russian casualties every day. Kyiv is now scaling up its drone industry, aiming to produce millions of FPV drones, cut dependence on Chinese parts, and eventually bring its battlefield technology to global markets. The United States is linking security guarantees for Ukraine to the terms of a future peace deal that could involve the status of the Donbas, according to the Financial Times sources. The report says Washington has signaled that long-term security support would depend on whether both sides reach an agreement on territorial issues. It also claims the US could offer Ukraine additional weapons to strengthen its peacetime army if Kyiv agrees to withdraw forces from parts of the eastern Ukraine it currently controls. The White House has pushed back on that account, saying the US is not imposing terms, but is focused on bringing both sides together for negotiations. President Volodymyr Zelensky said that a US document on the security guarantees is ready to be signed, but stressed that Ukraine's position remains firm. The country's territorial integrity is not up for negotiation. The Kremlin, meanwhile, says the question of territory remains central to any deal to end the war. The global order is starting to crack, and Davos 2026 made that impossible to ignore. That is the conclusion of an international outlet's analysis of the World Economic Forum this year. The publication notes that leaders no longer spoke as architects of a shared system, but as players positioning themselves in a world where rules are fading and power is gaining ground. One of the strongest signals came from Canada's Prime Minister, who said that so-called rules-based international order is nearing its end. Values, he argued, do not defend themselves without political will and real capability behind them. Mid-sized countries risk being on the menu, not at the table. The outlet highlights France's president linking the growing number of wars to the weakening of international law. When violations go unpunished, rules step aside and force takes over. European Commission leaders acknowledge that economic ties are no longer neutral. Dependencies, the analysis says, are now seen as a strategic vulnerabilities, pushing Europe to focus more on security, defense, and regions like the Arctic. The article also points to Donald Trump's speech, where he framed global politics around strength and sovereignty, arguing that rules only matter when they can be enforced. His remarks on Greenland sparked sharp reactions across Europe. In conclusion, the outlet maps out the main fault lines shaping the next phase of a global politics: Ukraine, the Middle East, the Arctic, Taiwan, the South China Sea, the Indo-Pacific. India is stepping back. Russian oil is getting stuck at sea. That's according to Bloomberg. The numbers tell the story. Deliveries of Russian oil to Indian ports have fallen to their lowest level in more than 3 years. What used to be well over 1.5 million barrels a day is now closer to just over 1 million. On the shipping maps, the impact is easy to see. More tankers are waiting without a place to unload. Some are circling near India and Oman. Others are turning towards China. Analysts say Russia is now using temporary storage in Indonesia. Several cargoes have already been offloaded at ports on Borneo and Java, turning them into floating warehouses rather than final destinations. Estimates suggest around 140 million barrels of Russian oil are currently sitting on the tankers at sea, and that stockpile has been growing since the summer. Not long ago, India was one of Russia's biggest buyers after the full-scale war against Ukraine began. But as sanctions tighten, New Delhi is shifting back toward the Middle East. State and private companies are increasing purchases from Oman, Iraq, and UAE. For Russia, the result is simple and visible. More oil is moving, but less of it is actually being sold. And more of it is waiting at sea without a port, without a buyer, and without a clear destination. That's all for now. For more content, please subscribe.